We're talking with Chris Hadfield, the Canadian astronaut who became a social media sensation last year during his time aboard the International Space Station. Chris, welcome back to the show. And I just want to get back to what you were telling us about what you used to do in the evenings when you had some downtime on the International Space Station. And in particular, the photographs that you took, because thanks to social media, they went around the world. I followed you very closely via the photographs, still do follow you via the photographs. How did that come about? Because you were tweeting at one point, asking people to basically request from you what kind of photographs they wanted.
I flew in space 3 times, Anand, and the first couple times on shuttle flights, there was very limited capability to communicate real time just with regular people around the world. But now up on the space station, we have internet. It's not very fast internet, but it's internet all the same. And so now we can use social media on the space station. And that opened a whole new way to share the experience. In the past, where I could maybe take a picture but do nothing with it for months, now I could take a picture of somewhere, whether it was a beautiful sunrise or noctilucent clouds or some part of the world that's rarely seen, or a big city at night, and send it to the world and share it instantaneously, not just with the people in that picture, but with everybody around the planet. And that is a two-way communication. Me being sort of the eyes and thoughts of everybody else, sort of their representative, their vanguard up on the station. And so when I asked people, what do you want me to take a picture of? The resounding question from all around the world, from hundreds of thousands of people, was, take a picture of my hometown. And I found that really interesting, because it showed, of course, that people are proud of where they're from and they think it's beautiful and worth photographing, but also it showed that people want to see how they fit in with the rest of the world. How does my area look in perspective of everywhere else? That desire to truly see the perspective of our whole planet is fundamental to us. And I was in a rare position to help share it with people, and the reaction was contagious all around the world, till, as you say, millions of people were following along to see what we could see from the space station.
All right, and I was one of them, and in fact, I had one of your pictures as a screensaver on my computer, a picture you took of southern Africa. I think it was from over the Indian Ocean, looking westwards, and that was a great picture. I want to get to David Bowie's Space Oddity, which really went viral around the world and made you into an internet sensation. I think it was downloaded and seen, I think, 20 million times, which is a record by any means. First, let me ask you, how did you persuade NASA to allow you to take your guitar on board?
Music goes with people no matter where they go. Even if you don't bring an instrument with you to play, of course, music is in all of our heads. It's fundamental. Some of the earliest relics of any human creation we've ever fashioned has been musical instruments. And our psychologists and our psychiatrists at NASA and the other space agencies recognized early that we need to keep people psychologically healthy on the station, so let's provide musical instruments. And so NASA, as part of the psychological support program, put a guitar on the space station back just after people got up there, early on. And so all of the crews since August of 2001 have had that same guitar up there on board the space station. In my case, it was so perfect because I've been a musician my whole life, but also because it's a Canadian guitar, just by chance. It's a Larrivée that was made out in Vancouver. So for me, it was just like kismet to have a Canadian guitar when I've been a guitarist my whole life, to be able to write music, play all the music that I love, and even have a chance to record music up on the space station. Something to do in the evenings, a project with friends, and a real natural extension of a way to understand the art and the culture and the significance of what we're doing in space travel, not just the science and the math and the engineering.
What was the scariest thing, your scariest moment in space?
My scariest moment in space, I try and not be scared, because most people, when they think of fear and being scared, they think of sort of a paralysis or an inability to make good decisions, or a panic or a great rush of adrenaline, like a cat running away or something. That's not how you want your astronaut to be. You would prefer that they understand danger and they react to it appropriately, not just with a raw, uncontrolled emotion. There are lots of things that I've done that have a level of danger. Launching a spaceship, flying a rocket ship to space is dangerous, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the reaction has to be scared or fear, that instead your reaction can be different. And when I was outside on a spacewalk, on my first spacewalk, I was blinded by contamination in the suit. First one eye and then both eyes. And that's obviously more dangerous. It's not something that you would expect to happen, but how you react to it is really up to you. And I could have just been paralyzed by fear or not known what to do. But instead, because of preparation and training and understanding and thinking my way through it, in fact, we reacted much more appropriately, talked to the other astronaut I was out on a spacewalk with, talked to Houston, worked our way through the problem, and eventually just cried enough and diluted the contamination enough that I could start to see again and get back to work.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
So there's not always a direct correlation between danger and fear.
Right, sorry to interrupt, but was that some kind of chemical that got into your eye? Because I would imagine being in space is in itself disorienting. And then when you're blind, I mean, what's your point of reference then? Because there's nothing to fall on.
It was, in fact, the way that we keep our visor. Of course, when you're on a spacewalk, your helmet's like an enormous fishbowl with a huge piece of plastic in front of your eyes. And as you breathe, it would fog up. So we put anti-fog on it. And the old anti-fog that we used to put on it was kind of a nice mixture of chemicals and things that would work really well. But if any of that anti-fog happened to flake off or get picked up by a floating droplet of water and get into your eye, it would be almost the same as just squirting raw soap or oil into your eye. It's really hard for you to work with it. And you can't rub your eye when it's inside a fishbowl of a helmet. So it turned out to be just the anti-fog that we had on our visor. So when I was blinded, it was actually strangely comforting because there was no other danger. I had a good grip on the space station. I wasn't going anywhere. I had another person out there to help me. And it was almost sort of like peaceful, like maybe being in bed at home under the covers, where even though you can't see anything, you're warm and comfortable, and there's no immediate threat to your life. And we worked the problem and solved it. And I gave a long talk about it at a TED conference recently on the difference between danger and then your caveman fearful reaction. And if you can somehow disconnect the two, then you can maybe get to a place and do some things that otherwise you would never have a chance to do in your life.
Okay, Chris, great hearing about your experiences on the ISS. I just want to turn for a moment now to some of the other space programs around the world, particularly in China. China has got a space program right now. There's a rover which is on the moon, and there are plans for a space station that China wants to build by 2020, as well as flights to Mars. What do you think is the future of that?
Oh, I think it's a natural progression. Over the last, 70,000 years, we have incrementally sent out probes, had a look at what was there, and then slowly moved there. And that's how we spread as a species over the entire planet. And in the last 100 years, we actually followed that pattern using the best of our technology to now live in Antarctica. And some of the most fascinating space discoveries we've made in the last few weeks are because of our ability to see the universe from Antarctica, to put an observatory there and start to understand the universe around us. And that same pattern is happening in space, where we send out probes, and now we're starting to move out and live off of the planet, starting with the space station now. And it takes time, and cooperation is not always the most natural thing to do. But China's developed some technology, really piggybacking heavily on the technology that other nations have developed in the past, working closely with Russia to see how they built their spaceships. And so they've moved quite quickly, as you say, to building a space station, to launching people into space, and putting a robot driving around on the moon. And I think what really needs to happen now is wherever we possibly can, just as we have on the International Space Station, to try and get people who have this new leading edge technology to work cooperatively together. And you never would have thought, when I was a fighter pilot in the late 1980s, intercepting Soviet bombers in North American airspace, it would have been very hard to think that just a few years later, I'd be helping to build the Russian space station or that a couple decades later I'd command a spaceship that was built by Russia and the United States and 13 other countries and command an international crew. And I think we will continue to look for ways to cooperate, and it will just make sense, at least from a philosophical and historical point of view, if we can find a way to cooperatively do that with the Chinese space program also. They've done some amazing things already, and I think everybody stands to benefit by sharing the burden and giving ourselves the common enemy of complexity and cost as we try and understand the rest of the universe.
Right, and have you found that there's a greater level of cooperation among states when it comes to space programs than we would normally believe or normally encounter?
If you can give people a common goal, which in this case is a pretty clear one, trying to explore and understand everything else. You know, we've been very myopic, very much inwardly focused. You know, it's kind of a natural thing, but kind of very focused on our community or our city or our country or our planet. And yet, the more we learn about the rest of the universe, we realize just what a small piece of something so much bigger we are, like a little child starting to discover the world on the outside of their own home. And that understanding of our actual perspective then, I think, helps to put things into proportion on the surface of the world. And we have a common goal of trying to understand everything else. And when you can give people a common goal, then it tends to minimize the differences that exist on a local level. And, you know, it's not perfect, and there are shortages on Earth, and there's competition on Earth. That's natural, that's
right.
Human, that's the way it's always been. But there's also some pretty amazing things possible in the future, and exploring the universe is one of those. And the International Space Station is a great example of people doing that together, and hopefully we can combine that example as we head to the moon and to asteroids and further out into the solar system and beyond.
Chris Hadfield, thanks for joining us, sir.
Real pleasure to speak with you today, and I look forward to talking to you again on it.